All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. If I could have some silence at the back, I thought at least the masters of ceremony would call the house to order. You know? My name is Bufolo Joy Kinuendo, and if I see somebody I recognize over there, I'm gonna start calling people. Please do, because I can't even hear myself. It would be helpful. Thank you. Thanks, Nigel. So, my name is Bufolo Joy Kinuendo, and I am pleased to welcome you to this event. When we first conceptualized this event, we were thinking about the intersectionality of fashion, sustainability, and development. And many were just thinking about the glamorous side of fashion. And we were thinking about, yes, the glamorous side of fashion, but we thought about the impacts of fashion, of waste, of consumerism, on development, and we thought about how fashion could also be a lot more sustainable, and we thought about the ways in which fashion in itself could add to the issues of development. So today in this particular session, we will hear about how these different areas come together, how we can have companies that turn waste into fashionable aspects, and how we can see those fashion houses recognize the importance of what they use and how it impacts communities, but most importantly, how the creative sector can add into the economy and into development. So I'm very pleased, really, to be able to set the scene for this very catalytic space that we have brought together. Hopefully, when you leave today's event, you will have an opportunity to collaborate, to network, but to think beyond the spaces of the glamorous aspect of fashion, to think about how exactly we let capital flow to the important aspects of development. So it is my utmost pleasure to introduce the co-founders of Ambition Loop and some of the leading thinkers in climate, those that have also served as my principals I've had the pleasure of collaborating with, Mr. Nigel Topping and Gonzalo Munoz, who are the co-founders of Ambition Loop and the former climate champions, to the stage.
Thank you so much, Baholo. When Jacinda had the idea of doing an event on fashion and said that she wanted me and Gonzalo to say a couple of words, I thought she was joking. You have always been very classy. I'm feeling pretty natty tonight though, because I'm very lucky to have been lent a jacket by Patagonia, which is significantly classier than the rags I normally wear. And my tie is brilliant. So thank you so much and welcome everybody. Gonzalo, I just wanted to just say a couple of words by way of thank you. The first thing I want to say is that we founded Ambition Loop this year and we based it in Chile. Okay, we had a choice between the UK and Chile because I'm based in the UK, Gonzalo's based in Chile. But we did that very deliberately and not to make life easier, because we think that in many of these processes there's a structural bias towards the global north and nearly everything is run out of Geneva, London, New York and DC. And if we're serious about changing the flows of capital, then we have to be serious about changing the structures that we all work with, even though sometimes it makes it a little bit more difficult. So I'd just like to ask Gonzalo to say a little bit about what Ambition Loop is and why we set it up, and then I'll hand over to our next speaker, Gonzalo.
Well, thanks Nigel, thanks everyone for being here. Ambition Loop at the end is an NGO that is working to connect the role of the member states of the multilateralism with the real economy. It's a bridge that is accelerating the action in environmental topics such as plastic pollution and all of those impacts that we know fashion industry has, and accelerating financial flow towards those solutions, mostly in the global south. So really happy to be collaborating with all of you and really pleased to be part of this amazing event. Thank you, everybody.
Ambition Loop really exists to mobilise real economy actors in support of multilateral financial objectives, as Gonzalo says, whether it's climate or preventing desertification or addressing the scourge of plastics. And running through all of that is finance. Jacinda, who's been designing this and who's, you'll see later, runs the Climate Capital Mobilisation Accelerator, a collaboration we pulled together with great partners like Tim from GFANS. Really getting into the detail of what do we actually do beyond the big figures of the trillions to actually mobilise finance and actually grow pipelines. And one of our, it's been a real joy of ours in particular to partner with Capital for Climate and to build what we call the Climate Investment Engine. And to say a little bit more about that, I'd like to hand over to our dear friend Deborah.
Thanks, Nigel. So my co-founder, Tony Lent, and I are really happy to be here with this auspicious and very stylish crowd. Sustainable fashion requires sustainably sourced fiber, and nature-based solutions are key to the sustainable agriculture that produces that. Today, Capital for Climate has the premier platform for driving investment to the enterprises that are at the frontier of nature-based solutions, or NBS, globally, which include food and ag, forest and land use, and the blue economy. And the work started through a collaboration with the COP26 Climate Champions, which Nigel was leading with Gonzalo. Today, our partnership, Capital for Climate, the Ambition Loop, and the Climate Champions team are joined on this radical collaboration, a theme you didn't mention, but very core to Ambition Loop, to expand the climate investment engine that guides and mobilizes capital to the climate tipping points required to achieve a net zero, nature positive, and just transition. So let me just tell you a few words on Capital for Climate. We're a public benefit company. Everything that we do is focused on accelerating investment into the climate solution opportunities according to science-based roadmaps. And so we do this through investment communities, through a digital platform that shows pipeline and contextual intelligence about these various sectors, and capital facilitation services. And we started with nature-based solutions, which this theme connects to because they deliver more than a third of the carbon emissions reductions required by 2050 at a tenth of the cost of the energy transition, and at the same time protect biodiversity and provide community economic benefit. So, and these are most important in the global south, where we're seeing expected market returns and a lot of momentum growing. Our recent newsletter tracked 1.6 billion of investments announced just in Brazil in the last year alone. Today, our platform has the most comprehensive pipeline covering Brazil, all of Latin America, and sub-Saharan Africa, totaling 16 billion and growing. So we've also built an innovative investment community with leading Brazilian investors and international investors, with the goal of mobilizing $5 billion to nature-based solutions by COP30. This will be a huge demonstration to the world of this potential. And that work is going very well, and it really focuses on scaling NBS to millions of hectares to disrupt deforestation by 2030. With our partners, we're ready and poised to expand and to do it fast, because that's the name of the game these days. And as soon as we raise additional funding, and I'm here on behalf of our partnership to tell you about what we are raising funding for, which is to take the NBS pipeline to Asia, to replicate the Brazil investment community model, which is going very well, to replicate it globally, and to expand into other climate solution sectors that are key, carbon removal and hard to abate sectors. And this is where the fun starts. We invite some of you here to join leading philanthropies like the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, and Cisco Foundations to help us get this work done. You will have the opportunity to join as a leader and a co-founder of what we think is some of the most exciting work that's happening in the climate finance space today. And you will also gain access to this pipeline. So I'm thrilled for this evening. I know I have to wrap, but I want to give you 2 action items to do. One is to go to our investment platform and sign up, and you'll be in the flow as we produce a next version. And 2 is to go to our newsletter where you'll see all the global pipeline of deals coming out weekly. And then finally, come talk to Nigel, Jacinda, Gonzalo, myself, Tony, to look at how you can participate in this work, in this radical collaboration. So let's just do this, let's move the capital at the scale that's needed, in time that's needed, and we can do this. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to my valued.
Thanks, Deborah. Thank you so much. And we'll just turn to your left or to your right, depending on which side you're sitting. Please clear the very end, because the models are going to start just showing the looks. Please go ahead. Enjoy. We're going to start with Ellen Fisher. She's a renowned American clothing brand founded in 1984, known for its minimalistics, timeless designs, and strong focus on sustainability, of course. The brand emphasizes sustainable fabrics like cotton, organic cotton, of course, and recycled wool, the eco-friendly production processes. It promotes circular fashion through Renew and Waste No More programs, recycling and repurposing used garments, believe it or not. Ellen Fisher upholds fair labor practices. It is a certified B Corporation and strives for carbon neutrality. It buys less, buy better philosophy encourages customers to invest in high quality, durable, positioning the brand as a leader in sustainable fashion. Those were her first 6 looks. She is known as the queen of sustainable fashion. We're going to keep on going with Suzano. Suzano Spinova is a sustainable clothing brand formed through a partnership between Suzano and the Brazilian pulp company and Spinova, a Finnish tech firm. The brand produces eco-friendly textiles using patented technology that converts responsibility sources wood pulp into fibers, and this is all without harmful chemicals, using less water and of course less energy too. We're gonna keep on going with our models, and this one you definitely gotta know it is Patagonia. Patagonia was founded in 1973. We all know it is a leading American outdoor clothing brand known for its high performance gear and a strong focus on environmental and sustainability. The company uses eco-friendly materials like organic cotton, recycled polyesters, and promotes circular fashion through this, definitely you must have heard this, Worn Wear program, encouraging to repair, and not only that, but also reuse. And we're going to keep on focusing on Patagonia, who is heavily involved in environmental activism, donating 1% of their sales to environmental causes and advocates for fair labor practices. As an environmental cause and advocates for fair labor practices, I was telling you, as a certified B Corporation, it also supports policy changes for climate action, making sustainability central business to model and activism fair. And 2, you probably have seen the Worn Wear program, where you can just take some of your garments to their stores and have them just change, repair, or even convert it into something else. Most of us have seen pullovers like this made into cases for computers, laptops, even cell phones. So part of what we featured here at the fashion show. We're gonna keep on now with a company, African finished with Patagonia, jackets, pants, outdoor gear that we all know has just marked a before and after in the American outdoor clothing. With almost 50 years since its foundation, it's part of what we all have seen here. Now we're moving into an African wear, which is called Wear Ghana. Wear Ghana is a brainchild of two Ghanaian women focused changing the world for a better and for women. Akosombo is the sustainable company Wear Ghana uses for their textiles. They use textiles for Akosombo manufacturing facility, which, since you may not know, is 100% renewable energy power generated manufacturing facility. They also use agricultural waste, for steel production for textiles that are used in Wear Ghana clothing and are produced with 100% renewable energy and highest quality Ghanaian cotton. In our last ones, Marcos Mode. Hello, beautiful design too. Marcos Mode is a Cameroonian clothing brand that blends traditional African style with modern fashion while emphasizing sustainability. The brand not only that, but supports local artisans, uses eco-friendly, locally sourced materials, and prioritizes fair labor practices too. By producing in small batches, Marcos Mode promotes slow fashion, reducing weights, and overproduction. This approach highlights both cultural heritage and, of course, environmental responsibility. So you've seen our models, and now it's time to discuss. We're going to have wonderful conversations here on stage. Let me just pass the microphone to Jacinda.
Thank you so much, Carol. How fabulous was that? Sustainability can look good. Sustainability can touch your life every day. You can be the consumer that makes a change for your society. And we know that in order for the consumers to have access to sustainable goods, our financial institutions, our governments, our MDBs have to align behind financing this just and equitable transition. Textile manufacturers across the world want to develop more sustainable fabrics, but will you invest in them? Will you back them when they need to have regenerative agricultural products? So we've got some of these partners with us today who are actually doing this work to show that it is possible. And while they're setting up the chairs, I would like to invite our panelist today, Mr. Philip Osafo from Ghana, who was the manufacturer of the textiles for the Wear Ghana fabric outfits. I would like to invite Timothy Afukumsen to join us. We have my colleague in finance, Sagarika Chatterjee from the Climate Champions team, the finance lead. And then finally we have Sophia from Threading Change, because we always want to make sure we include the youth in these discussions and ensure that their positions are held. So we are going to go rapid fire through this. Apologies, we are running a few minutes behind, but I would just like to set the scene. Each of these people are doing something in order to accelerate the transition, specifically in fashion today. We're just using that as an example of how we need the finance. And so I can ask you what you're doing and how you were able to get financing to achieve your targets and what you need to get more financing and support. And if I could just ask the wonderful, beautiful people in the back to please keep it down so that we can hear the contributions of these people that have flown across the world to be with us today, we will be so grateful. Over to you, Philip, please.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Philip. I'm director for Akosombo Textiles, Akosombo Industrial Company Limited. So it's a fabric manufacturer based out of Ghana, and we produce these very colorful African wax prints that you can see me wearing. I think our strategy now is really hinged on three things that I want to just briefly highlight. The first bit of it is that we really push all our manufacturing to be based out of renewable energy. So our whole manufacturing plant is sited next to one of the largest renewable hydropower plants in West Africa. So just by design, by construction, all the manufacturing really is using this renewable energy. And we've gone ahead to decarbonize our production processes. So all the boilers, everything we use for steam generation is not running on fossil fuels anymore. We are now using biomass agro-waste to do this. And this is really a very big plank of our strategy. I think the second bit of what we are also trying to do is to source more locally and to use locally produced, organically produced cotton sources. So again, with the whole push towards verticality and actually, shortening supply chains, this is a very big, important part of our strategy, and it helps push our story much, much stronger. And I think the third and final bit of it, which we are now exploring, is to focus on the circular economy. I think some of you may know that Ghana is probably one of the largest destinations for used clothing globally. And in fact, as we talk, the NGOs are doing quite a lot pushing on this campaign. And while it is waste as used clothing, you can also think of it as a feedstock if you think about it from a circular economy perspective. So what we are also about to start working on now, hopefully in 2025, is to think about how we can collect, sort some of this used clothing, go through a mechanical recycling process, generate sort of these fibers, which can then be blended in with our local organic cotton, use these renewable sort of low carbon production processes, and produce sort of like a good strong product for the international market. And once it's sold on international markets, then really we'll be looking to the demand on the market to ensure that a green premium is sort of understood and that the ESG commitments of all the big international brands actually can be delivered. And we can really tie all of this along, along the lines of pushing for what a circular economy is and what all the SDG goals are. So exciting for us, and I can talk more about this. Thank you.
Yeah, so please grab Philip in the back and talk to him more about it later. I'm going to skip a little bit, Tim, because I want you to come in at the end and talk about the building. But Sagarika, over to you. Can you talk about how we're supporting partners through the Climate Champions team to access this finance?
Thank you. Well, firstly, I really enjoyed that fashion show. That's definitely been my highlight of New York Climate Week, and I certainly hope that I can afford. I have my credit card, so I'm hoping I can afford some of the outfits that I saw there, because that would definitely help me. So we're so pleased that the Climate Champions are a partner of Ambition Move's Climate Investment Engine. The reason we're a part of this is because we have to get the whole of the ecosystem going. So whether it's the fashion supply chain or it's a supply chain of any company in any industry, what we need is climate solutions on the ground so the whole of that supply chain can move towards being more sustainable. So specifically what we've been doing is curating and shortlisting practical climate solutions on the ground. So these are basically ventures, but some of them are also government-sponsored projects. And then what we try to do is bring these together with financiers, also sometimes a discussion with policymakers. And the exciting thing is that there are climate project ventures in every region that we've covered. And we've covered 5 regions: Africa, Asia-Pac, Arab region, and the Latin America, Caribbean region as well. So just to give you an example, this week we had some of our project developers, including Roof, who provides solar, Morpho, who are working on reforestation, together with some really big financial institutions. For those financial institutions, sometimes it's the first time that they're getting a sense of the real solutions that there are on the ground in places like Chad, in Uruguay, and some of these are really great investment opportunities. They might not be ready for all institutional investors, but they will, by meeting the financiers, get a better sense of where they need to get to so that they can, in time, access that finance.
Oh, can you hear me okay? It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Sophia, and I'm the founder and executive director of the world's leading youth-led ethical fashion organization called Threading Change. And our mission is simple, not that simple to accomplish, but it's the 6 Fs: a feminist, fossil, fuel-free fashion future. And I found this organization after attending COP25 in Madrid. Originally, I had my flight booked to Santiago. And I really felt that these conversations in fashion really excluded young people, despite the fact that about half the world's population are under 30. And we are not only the leaders of tomorrow, but leaders of today. I had the pleasure of being at an event earlier today of the Global Circularity Protocol launch, and it just got me thinking, the people that are going to be really pushing and mandating and legislating and also, most importantly, implementing the policies, the metrics, and the real change that we need to see in not just fashion, but circular economy, to save biodiversity in general, are going to be the leaders, young leaders of this room that are going to be carrying this work forward. Older generations, they have set the example, they have done positive things, but I think it's important to note that with the fact that 50% of the population is under 30, despite that, only 0.76% of climate grants from the largest climate philanthropy foundations go to youth climate justice-led initiatives. And this number is even less when you think about young people working in fashion, and it's even less when you think about BIPOC youth in fashion. And as we know, there's a picture right there of my colleague Janet, who's based in Nairobi. Ghana is an area in Africa with lots of textile waste, and Nairobi in Kenya is another one. The Dandora dump site, the Gombe market, currently it's estimated there's every second there's a dump truck of textiles dumping clothing waste, whether it's in Ghana, in Kenya, or in Chile. And for us, it's looking at this dire reality of thinking of the global north consumption patterns literally drove me to want to make an impact. And we really see that it needs to be a conversation in combination with industry transformation, which these spaces are great for, but also of consumer education as well. And I've heard in many spaces today and throughout the week that people are naming and shaming certain brands. And while that can happen sometimes, it's important to note that young people are really leading this transition. We have mobilized over 10,000 youth around the globe when it comes to engaging educational programs, being featured on the Global Innovation Story Map, taking up spaces in events, and also showcasing what we're doing when it comes to fashion innovation, legislation for policy change, and also textile cleanup work. I have one more slide that goes into the policy work, but maybe I'll talk about it later.
Yeah, we got a few minutes cut out, so we'll but thank you so much, and it's so relevant. No, we need that energy, we need that innovation. And finally, one of the things that she mentioned is that we need to inform and educate and upskill our communities, financial institutions, and partners. So Tim with GFANS Africa will talk a little bit about what they've been doing to accelerate the action in this area.
Okay, thank you very much, Yacinda. So this is the event that I've been at. I've been out of fashion, right? I was thinking of going back and wear my African clothes before I can come, but my meeting delayed. So most of you may be aware of GFANS. GFANS is one of the outcome of COP26 that Nigel was the UN climate champion. And in Africa, we've been working a lot with financial institutions. Globally, I mean, it's led by Mike Carney and Mike Bloomberg as the co-chairs and Mary Shapiro as the vice chair. But in Africa, we have advisory board and then also a coalition of all the key financial institutions. So if you talk about AFDB, Africa 50, AFC, DBSA, EcoBank, all the big financial institutions. Now, what is the value of this particular meeting? And when you brought this concept, I said, gee, what you're doing actually is scaling up. Because we have very small recycling, this doing jewelries and this one doing clothing, this one doing some bags, recyclable bags. They are good, but they are not scaled. Because if I go to a bank and I want to really pitch an investment, something 550,000, 100,000, is not going to take them, right? So there should be a scale. And this is why what you're doing is very, very, very important. I mean, having an Ellen Fisher in Patagonia, it's taking it to scale. And with that scale also brings some form of investment interest, right? So that is to be encouraged. And then also the capacity building to really integrate climate measures, not only the recycling, but also in the mainstream textile, manufacturing, so that we're able to have more biodegradable, the image that she showed over here, most of these ends up in the rivers and in the sea. And this is where you find fishes entangled in a lot of the clothes that we wear here. And so we need to rationalize the whole value chain of the textile and the fashion industry. And this is why we are very committed to support and then also to bring in financiers that could show interest in financing this trajectory, this way that we need to go. Because it's going to be the future. And although it came a little bit, I was telling Nigel, so why didn't we do this before, right? But I believe that that's the right way we need to go. Sustainable fashion, sustainable textiles. And we are very, very committed to support that.
And that's the kind of things we want to hear from all of our funding friends and investor friends and MDBs in the room, because at the end of the day, we can all talk about what needs to be done, but if there's not funding that supports this transition, then it will never go anywhere. And part of what the Climate Champions team and what Ambition Loop is doing is bringing spotlights to the good work that is being done on the ground, the innovations that are working, the things that can bring the change that we want to see. We are the change that we want to see. And even myself, I'm wearing these very handmade fabric that I will keep for hundreds, I will pass it down to my child. So sustainability doesn't always mean, something new. It means something old that you hold on to and that we preserve, as opposed to some of the fast fashion trends, which can be creating the waste and the images that you've seen here. Our beaches are suffering, our people are suffering, and not only in the textile space, but I think it's very important to understand we're using fashion as a model for how we can invest in all of the industries, whether it's hard to abate sectors, whether it's agriculture, whether it's financing the right types of vehicles to ensure that our children have the right types of tools and education so that they can be the innovators that she's saying that they need to be for the future. Are these the types of things that they're learning today so that they can be the leaders of tomorrow for a more sustainable future? So we're really grateful that you all came. The next panel will be on plastics and textiles. And so with that, I would like to hand over to our lovely host, Gonzalo Munoz, who will come up and moderate the next panel. Thank you so much.
Great, so thank you so much. Before we move into the next panel, we're very pleased to have with us Sheila Agarwal-Khan from UNEP. Sheila, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gonzalo. So 350 to 450 million tons, depending on different institutions who are doing research, they say 350 to 450 million tons of plastic end up as waste every year in dump sites and landfills, littered everywhere. And today on the other side, well actually this whole week on the other side of the town, there has been a number of discussions among governments, industry actors, because a plastics treaty, a globally binding treaty, is supposed to be negotiated at its last round at the end of November this year in Korea. So what does that mean for the textile industry? I heard lots of discussions about decarbonization here, some discussions on circularity, but textiles, it's what, 100 million tons of waste every year? And some of you mentioned the dump sites where you see textiles in there. 50 million or so is plastic textiles waste. And so while there is a huge market, and there are some who are trying to have a more circular economy approach, the challenge we see is that there is still, when clothes are passed hand one to another, at some point they end up as waste. And so they end up either in a landfill or in a dump site where countries don't have sanitary landfills. And so it ends up, if you have ever walked on a dump site, and I would encourage you to do that, it's quite interesting to see acres and hectares of land that is just filled with all kinds of waste, especially plastic waste. And so the challenge that governments are raising right now is, what do you do with this plastic waste? Because at some point, as much as circularity can be promoted to keep materials in reuse, at some point it's going to become waste. So how do you get back, and I see some very interesting innovations about how do you put it back into the feedstock for new textiles. But there are concerns being raised. There are concerns being raised about the chemicals in some of these. Those of you who have followed some of the international negotiations on chemicals and know that there's a global framework on chemicals that was adopted by governments and industry and other stakeholders with some 28 targets, which also look at what does it mean for sustainability in the textile sector. So beyond decarbonization, what does it mean for the pollution and nature footprint of the industry? PFAS, many of you will know PFAS as a whole range of chemicals that have been used on textiles to give them their waterproof or their fireproof characteristics and are now being phased out. So what does that mean for, because at the end of the day, if there are harmful chemicals, you have an industry which, if recycling, is going to be exposed to those chemicals. And if you're selling these back, then you have a consumer who could be exposed to these same chemicals. So the big challenge to all of you, and I see lots of very exciting innovation here, is how do you look, as long as you are decarbonizing the sector, how do you look at not just the nature footprint where you're looking at regenerative agriculture, but how do you look at the pollution footprint and what are the chemicals that are going into especially the plastic textiles? Because as these are being recycled and being brought back and kept in the economy, that we can have a safer and, let's say, more responsible textile industry. Thank you.
Sure, so now we move to the next panel where we will explore, as Sheila said, how can we finally try to solve part of the problem called 50 million tons of plastic waste coming from the textile industry into the environment. And therefore, I'm delighted to invite Constanza Gomez, first CEO of Sortile. Constanza, please join me on stage. Matthew Moroni, Head of Sustainability Finance and Metabolic. Thank you, Matthew. Marina Negrisoli, Sustainable Director for Susano. Marina, that's there. And Carmen Gama, Director of Circular Design at Ellen Fisher. So please join me. Sure. So it's great that we will go through these very concrete examples on how companies around the world are tackling the problem of plastic pollution coming from the textile industry, but not only by just replacing it with, let's say, natural fibers, but also considering the technical elements that are expected to be perceived and assumed in the textile industry that is really sophisticated. So I would like each of you to introduce what you're doing in that sense. And finally, Sheila, if I can ask you to react to that as you're in the very privileged position of taking a look of the broader picture in relation to the plastic treaty. And hopefully you can see here some solutions that can get embedded into that. So I will start with Constanza first.
Hi everyone, I'm Constanza Gomez. As Gonzalo mentioned, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Sortile. What we do at Sortile is really the identification, traceability, and eventual recycling of textiles. And the way we do that is we have a hardware machine that's able to identify the material composition of clothing in under a second. And we work with fiber recyclers to get their specs along different areas of color and naturality so that we can sort for their specifications and give them the correct feedstock for their technologies.
Thanks so much, Constanza. We will sort those people over there, whether you're hungry or thirsty, eat or drink silently, please. This is much more important. Yeah, I'm talking to you. So, next, we'll move now to Matthew, if you can now explain what you're doing, please.
Thank you, Gonzala, as well as Jacinda and Nigel at Ambition Loop and Regeneration for putting on this incredible event. It's absolutely wonderful. So I'm the head of sustainable finance for Metabolic, and we're quite interested in how you can piece together the whole supply chain at once. When you talk about transition, like a fiber sorter, you need to make sure you have enough feedstock coming in, enough feedstock coming out. And we were looking at that this morning in terms of brands not really wanting to create offtake contracts in these multilateral fashion, and how do you actually set up all of the pieces so that they get nurtured and grow up at the same time. So I'll talk later about the Circular Innovation Collective and how we did that in Amsterdam and publish a guide to do that in many other cities and sectors around the world.
Brilliant, thanks so much, Matthew. Marina.
Yeah, hi, I'm Marina. I work for Suzano. We are one of the largest base material biological worldwide. And 10 years ago, we decided that textile markets could be an avenue for sustainability play. So we started investing in R&D, technology, lab, on how we would produce a textile that would be sustainable. And we have been investing, it's pretty hard for those here that try technology and innovation. And through acquiring equity stakeholders here and there, now we made it. I think we have the nano microfibrillated cellulose. You guys saw here on t-shirts, on clothes. And this is not only much better than the polyester, but now the last product we have on an LCI assessment, it has 74% better LCA in terms of carbon versus cotton, and 100% less water than cotton. So the aim of all this investment is to produce a sustainable material that is we can regenerate and produce wood again and produce, we have to take care of the microplastics. I'm not going to go into these details, but an important point that I want to bring here is that we have to really believe and look long term. Because the first batches of the products we have in lab, we estimated cost to be 20 times polyester. Now we are already, at a premium of 80%, and we have market contracts. You saw here Jack and John, for those who are in Europe familiar with the brand. We have an agreement with Adidas. So I think the point is, how do we believe, we invest, and we wait for technology to become marketable?
Muito obrigado. Thanks, Marina. So Carmen, if you can introduce us to the generalities of what Eileen Fisher is doing.
Yes, thank you so much for having me here. I'm very excited to share what we do. So, as you saw Eileen Fisher on the Runway, we're like a business where sustainable clothing company. We've been in business for 40 years. We are basically in the business of making garments that take us away from the linear model to one that is more circular. We're far from getting there, but by doing that, we're really focusing on making garments that have materials that they're renewable, regenerative, and recyclable. So right now I'm just going to focus more on the latter, which is recyclability. My area of expertise is really how do we divert garments from landfill and really give them a higher life than the current state. So for Eileen Fisher, we started a take-back program in 2009. We started very organically with the employees just returning back their garments, but this program grew very quickly. In 2013, we opened that to our customers and we say, we would like our clothes back, thank you very much. So basically, we buy back any Eileen Fisher item, we give them a $5 coupon, and what we do with them is basically we resell the ones that are in perfect condition, and the ones that they're, and that's about 45% of the garments, or 50% depending on the year. They're in perfect condition, so we resell them for our channels. Then about 20% of the garments that come back are slightly flawed, still in wearable condition, but we donate it. We partner with Souls for Souls. And then the rest of about 30% of the inventory is beyond wear, so that's damaged. So that's kind of like my area that I handle. So for that, we either do repair, remanufacture, which is about just 10% of the inventory that we receive is about that. And then the next one is fiber-to-fiber recycling. That's the biggest solution for our damaged inventory, because for Eileen Fisher, the beauty is that the majority of their materials are natural fibers. So there's a lot of current technology which is ancient, really. It's like mechanical recycling. It's been here for a really long time. You just go to Italy and they've been doing this for over 100 years. So a lot of these materials, we put them back as feedstock, as we were talking previously on the other panel, and we make back our own yarn. So that's for fiber recycling, and the last solution is downcycling, just a lot of blended materials or things that have synthetics. So yeah, that's in a nutshell.
Well, thanks so much, Carmen. What I would like, Sheila, if you can react to what you've just heard, and then send them the question that you would like them to also answer when it's by connecting this to the treaty. Well, what do you think the treaty would expect from these 4 companies, and then each one of you can answer very rapidly because we're running very short of time.
No, I think that it's very impressive to see the circular feedstock and the recycling, because I think having take-back systems and being able to use waste textiles back into the textile manufacturing process, I think that's excellent. I think what would be very interesting to hear from you is how do you see, for example, the recycling part where you have a harmful chemical that is inside the textile, and then it's going to be used into another textile. And so if I'm a consumer, let's say I'm trying to avoid a waterproof coating because I'm terrified of what it's going to do to my body over time, now I'm suddenly trying to be environmentally conscious and maybe have exposure to some of these chemicals. And that's a question that governments are really deliberating about, is what do you do with the exposure issues of harmful chemicals and plastics, especially when it comes to recycling. The second question, which is for the Global Forum on Chemicals, is I don't hear much being said about the pollution across the life cycle, from production and across the full life cycle, is because the chemicals, the materials going in, there's microplastics coming out as you wash your fibers, and I didn't hear too much of that.
Thanks so much. So, Carmen,
I can jump in very quickly. So for the first question, so that's a great question about the chemicals and mechanical recycling on our end. The beauty of it is that we use our own garments to make our own yarn, right? So we've been very diligent in really using like Blue Sign certified chemicals. We have a chemist in-house, so the majority of our garments are made with safe chemistry. But we've been in business for 40 years. So, right, and these garments that we receive, they've been washed, worn, so we cannot control the products that the customers are using. So for example, we're in the process right now to making a new yarn from our wool garments. We are testing the end yarn because again, these chemicals that the customers might have used could be liable for the end product. So we are for sure testing all of that. And then we don't have a lot of PFAS in our inventory, but even for the ones, the jackets or the outerwear that we might have, all of those right now, unfortunately, are going to downcycling. So the effects on the build and automobile industry for shoddy, that's also TBD. So we're very conscious about this, but we're like the industry, we're just learning about what are the new things and developments that we can do for it. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Nothing's perfect yet.
Marina?
Thank you. When we started developing the technology, we looked through the lenses of circularity and we tried to build a process from the tree to the yarn that would have the minimum impact possible. So last year we had the first industrial scale mill, and it has no residuals and it has no pollution. It's on a zero kind of concept. So that took a lot of investment, but we believe that it pays off. Because one of the main points that we believe that the product delivers now, it's you can use, you can wash, probably not so durable yet compared to polyester, but you have known microplastics.
I understand that the Norwegian team used it during the Olympics. How was that experience?
Yeah, that was the Danish and Finnish Olympic teams they used. And that was a good experience. We took a lot of pictures, but they enjoyed that, and I think they had that much more for the case and for their contribution and sustainability approach.
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you.
Great question, very difficult question, but it's really about alternatives and assessment and implementation. I mean, there is very good models for how these forever chemicals are collected, aggregated under the Stockholm Convention with things like PCBs and transformers. I think from a top-level international governance perspective is really encouraging the brands to identify the SKUs and other identifying IDs of the products that actually have these materials, so that as the sorting, optical sorting, infrared sorting infrastructure is rolling out, they can be aggregated as hazardous waste and disposed of properly.
I have a slightly skeptical view of that. So we've been developing our technology now for about 3 years, and there's certain chemicals and additives that we already know that we can identify. And I was actually just chatting with Herman earlier, that we know we can identify, for example, silicone coatings. And there's certain ones that we can identify today. The biggest issue for us when we're doing sorting technology is that in order to build our models, we have to know, we have to have data on what's in clothing. And the reality that most companies aren't like Eileen Fisher and that know what's in their garments. And it doesn't even have to get as far as chemical additives. We've done a lot of research and talked to a lot of companies, for example, about the usage of nylon 6 versus 6.6. That's not material. We're not even talking about chemicals here. And most companies don't know the type of nylon that they use in their garments, let alone the chemical additives that are in them. And that creates a significant problem from us, from a technology standpoint. How do we build the technology to identify it if most people don't even know what's in it? So it's a really, really difficult problem to solve. We're doing our best. Thankfully, there are brands, and I would say there's increasingly more brands that are more aware and that are trying to have more responsible chemistry, and so that helps us in getting some of these agreements to get data around what these chemical fingerprints look like in our technology. But unfortunately, I think it's going to take some time. And until we get those certainties, I think what Carmen was saying is certain garments that have a high likelihood of having these chemicals in them will have to go to either reclamation or downcycling channels.
Well, thank you so much. I'm really pleased that the people down out there were commenting about the importance of the panel, but I'm sure that many of us enjoyed but also learned a lot about this. Sheila, thanks so much for being here, available to also bring this really urgent perspective of this is one of the most important sectors that will have to evolve towards fulfilling a treaty that will put us on track to reducing the plastic pollution into the environment up to zero, hopefully very soon. Yeah, so bring a round of applause to our panelists. Thanks so much. And I will.
Wonderful panel, thank you so much. And as Gonzalo said, hope everybody is enjoying. Now we have our third and last panel. I would like to invite, please, Sarah Ken, Chief Sustainability Correspondent of the Business of Fashion, to get on stage. Just start moderating our last panel. Really interesting conversations here going on. And we would have in this one, Sarah? Yes, wonderful. Please, the stage is yours, and you can just add the
Great, thank you so much, and I'm delighted to be joined, and also public service announcement for whoever left their phone on stage. It's right here. I'm delighted to be joined on stage by Eva Cruz from Pangaea, who has a long history of advocating in this space, and Matt Dwyer from Patagonia. Thank you guys for being here. Where I wasn't ready to go.
It doesn't have to be weird.
Like we like each other. Ava, thank you for joining us here today. I think it's wonderful to be on a stage and not just talking to fashion people, because often these conversations happen within the industry, but you don't get to talk so much to investors or policymakers. This is an industry that has sort of flown under the radar, and you would know all about that because you've been advocating in this space for 15 years. So I wonder if you could start by contextualizing a little bit how the conversation has changed in all the time you've been looking at sustainability in fashion.
Is this one on? Yes. Great. Thank you so much for having me, for having us, and for putting a spotlight on the fashion industry. So just to frame the context, fashion industry is one of the world's largest industries. It's also one of the world's most resource intensive. We source from nature, but we also use a lot of fossil fuel-based materials. And we also have a very diverse supply chain that was outsourced, especially in the 70s and the 80s, and with a lot of social implications and challenges. So basically, name an issue, fashion has it. And some years ago, we didn't know fully what the impact of this industry was, and that's about the time when I started digging into it. So I think back in 2006-07, when Al Gore's The Inconvenient Truth came out, sort of we started to have some more mass media conversation about climate. And at the time, I was running Copenhagen Fashion Week and the Danish Fashion Institute, and we started looking into what are the impacts of this industry, and nobody knew. We only knew that there were some issues around child labor, there's some chemicals, we know it was highly water intensive, but all of that. So we started setting up events around it, and one of them was the Global Fashion Summit, which was held in conjunction with COP15. So we're coming up at the COP29 very soon. And at the time we called it CSR, it didn't really have a language. And we didn't properly sort of as an industry coming together. So that was sort of the start of a lot of movement in the space. Also the Sustainable Apparel Coalition and other organizations came about. And things started sort of moving. And I thought, maybe 5 years in, we would have solved a lot of those issues. Here we are, 15 years in, and we're literally, nowhere near the targets or the aspirations of what's needed. We just discussed it earlier, but just to name a material like cotton, which I think most of you guys would probably think it's great, it's a natural fiber. What's wrong with that? It's one of the most land-intensive, water-intensive, pesticides-intensive crops. And we're still at 2% recycled cotton in the market, 2% organic cotton. Most of it is conventionally produced still. So to be absolutely frank, I'm a bit concerned with the pace of things. I think we're still at a place where about 50% of the industry is not moving. There's another 50 of them that are doing actually a lot of good work, but they're being run over by companies with no minimum criteria or barriers for entering the market that can just come in from the side, pressure price points. No legislation is sort of hindering them putting out products made with tons of nasty chemicals or with an extractive behavior. So, I think we're at a dire place now where things really need to step up. And I want to be the stubborn optimist that I've always been, but I'm concerned with things, with companies thinking that we can still do it, just do a little bit, a little capsule collection, little test of a little bit of materials, and keep talking about innovations can't come to scale, so we still have to stick with the main drivers. I mean, it needs to be a bit uncomfortable, and it seems like nobody's really willing to do that.
Right, and there's a lot of complexity, a lot of nuance, but oftentimes the messages that come out are quite simplistic, and I think it's interesting to talk about plastics. The most commonly used material in the industry is polyester. There was a report that just came out yesterday saying that the volumes just keep growing and growing.
In 2019 is when we had the last assessment when I was part of GFA before COVID, and there the fashion industry was on a trajectory to grow 81% in volume towards 2030. And we know we're already exceeding all planetary boundaries.
And these are really intractable problems because polyester is a very functional fiber, and even companies like Patagonia, and I'm sure you're looking forward to this question, Matt, companies like Patagonia, which has changed its entire business model to be in business for the planet, Mother Earth, its biggest shareholder, primarily uses polyester and synthetic fibers in its product. So how do you think about that, and how do you find solutions?
Great question. Yes, was anticipating it, and I get that all the time. And first, just a quick high five to the previous panelists. I'm not qualified at all to follow them or sit with David. You all are amazing. Thank you. Not dodging the question. So to the question about plastics, and she just asked me that while we were sitting over here listening to the last talk. Patagonia is and always has been a technical product company. And the challenge that I face every day, and my job, forget what my title is, my team and I live in the tension of our mission statement, which is that we are in business to save our home planet. And the third part is by virtue of making and selling stuff. So we're here responsible for the footprint, past, present, and future. Something we say to each other every day is, don't let perfect get in the way of progress, right? We make everything from the things you saw walk down the runway today to high alpine kits that people wear doing really crazy, cold, wet, out in the wild things. And that's why we use synthetic fibers. Now, is that an excuse? No. Do we use them where we don't need to? No. We have a very thoughtful process in our design principles. Ivan Shinardi is still kicking and still is in all of our product reviews and still keeps us in check as far as what best product is and is working with Shinardi on what best for the planet is.
they ensure that we're making the right decisions. Back to the tension that we live in, we talk about things like, and David Stover is here somewhere, he started an amazing company that recycles derelict fishing nets in terms of the products that we have in our line. Well, should you replace a recycled polyester bottle flake material that's just fine to serve its purpose with a recycled fishing net? And actually we find that we often have to reframe the question, because the products that we make, form, what it's made out of, should always follow function, which is the discussion we need to have, and the function should always solve a problem. Is it better to keep that maybe lower impact bottle flake material in our product line? Or is it better to ensure that the most deadly form of ocean plastic, which is derelict fishing gear, doesn't get there? So these are the conversations we have. I'm not dodging the question, I promise, but just to give you a little more context and nuance. And I think one of the things that we were talking about over coffee just a minute ago is that we are hooked on snacky sound bites. And we, as people who make things, and we, as people who buy and consume things and are owners of products, should be asking questions. The best thing that we can all do for the planet is know where our stuff came from, ideally, who made it, and how they're treated, what it's made of, and then hopefully if you get there, know what to do with it when you're finished with it.
But having Mother Nature as your biggest, the planet as your biggest shareholder now, how do you think about, has that changed the way you think about the way the company operates? And what are the big things that you want to solve for?
The short answer is no. So Patagonia, the for-profit apparel company in the region in South America, our job is to run a healthy business, to prove that you can do right for the planet and that you can run a healthy business. We're here to do good and to do well. And if we're not running a good business, then how can I convince anybody in this room or on this planet to do what we're doing too? Regarding our ownership, Yvon Chouinard was the founder of the company, is the founder of the company, was the only shareholder in the company, and at some point that asset was going to have to get transferred. What he decided to do, which is the amazing thing about this, is institute for the rest of time the principles that he and the other people who were around at the beginning of the company believed in so dearly. And that's what's so important about this shift. Our jobs didn't change at all. What happens to the net profit of the company is spoken for.
What's happened to the impact of the company since you made this change?
Well, I'll start with, since 1984, we've given away over $150 million through 1% of the planet for grassroots activism. That's kind of the cake we started with. And now, I think last year we gave away $75 million to various organizations. So these could be grants, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 to impassioned young people who come to us caring about what happens in the neighborhood. This could be land acquisition and funding, not just in Ventura, California, where we live, but places like pebble mining in Alaska, places like activists who want to protect bears. One of the things that we've done over the past few years. So for us, it's about what can I do today? What are the actions that I and my team and the apparel company have in front of us? Kind of circle number one. Circle number two is where can I have an outsized influence in the conversation? How can I matchmake? How can I get these passionate people hooked up with people who can fight them? How can I use my voice to talk to you all, some of whom are enjoying beverages in the back, it's great. And then lastly, how can we use what results from the company to magnify that as many times as possible?
Which didn't answer the question about the company's own impact.
And really, I'm going to come dead clean because my team lives right next to the gnarly reality of running a company that makes stuff. I deal with the bright future that is some of the technologies we just heard about. I deal with the gnarly reality of fossil fuel consumption and textile production and working towards fair wage in the supply chain. And in real life, we're an apparel company, you're an apparel company, there's other brands here. I sat next to 3 of our competitors today and had an amazing conversation on why public land protection is important, but we all share the sameness.
Right, and it is hard. And I think, Ava, it's really interesting because you moved over from the advocacy side and went into the corporate world. You moved to Pangaea, which sort of set itself up, for those who don't know, to try and bring material innovations to the market. But that has proved really, really difficult to make work, and I think you guys are still trying to figure it out. What are the challenges, and what unlocks do you see?
No, I think one of the challenges is what I also mentioned before, that it's difficult to bring the new innovations to scale. If we look at our products, we have an an ambition to be what we call earth positive. Right? So we want to give back more than we take, and we essentially strive to make a product that's better for the planet than if it wasn't there, which is very challenging. It's more philosophy, you can say. But if we look at what we end up selling most of, it's recycled and organic cotton blends, and not so much the innovations. We could be sequestering carbon and creating sunglasses, or making print from air ink, which is pollution sucked out of the air, or different fibers that are taken out of waste streams or in other ways. But essentially, essentially that is what we're aspiring for, right? That we can exchange some of those big sinners in our industry, the biggest volume drivers, with better materials that could, come in abundance or exist in a circular system, so that the products would be, better as they are made, and hopefully also durable, because I know that that's also a fingerprint or footprint, whatever you call it, from Patagonia, is really the durability, why they haven't yet taken Pindaya's flower down to replace their goose and duck down.
We're testing.
But it needs to be washable at 50 times or something, because it's a criteria, that it's got durability. And I think for all of you guys, if it's not from a finance lens but a personal shopper lens, the most sustainable product is the one that's already made. So the one that you have in your wardrobe, and the amount of time you use it, and what you do with it, and how we keep those products alive, is still the most sustainable thing. And I know we are in the business of selling stuff and also new stuff. So, because we also want people to buy some new once in a while, but it's more interesting actually, how can we create also new ways of keeping the products alive, and it's also a good business sense. You can sell the same one 5 times, right? Why wouldn't you? But so I think, some of the solution sits in that, but I really do think that there's a consumer component to it as well, which is what we buy, how much we buy, how we treasure it, and what we do with it, and how we can create those loops.
Oh, I so do. I want to stay on script. So what Ava's describing is the concept of activation energy, right? Somebody needs to take the risk, they need to make the investment, they need to put an outsized proportion of their time and energy into something to prove that it can be done, and for us that means to be product. Patagonia is not big, right? We have a lot of voice, we have great credibility, we tell great stories, but in real life we're almost nobody to any of our supply chain partners. So for us, my job is being the activation energy and showing that fishing nets can be recycled into high quality apparel, not just so that I can do that and think it's cool, but that when I go to a brand much larger than mine, I can present them a shiny box with a big green button and say it works, here's the product, here's who you call to go get it, and that's how we have the influence.
We're even smaller.
Yeah, when you said that, I was like, Patagonia is reasonably big. But I see your point about supply chain partners. But one of the things that has been very interesting in the fashion industry that is relatively new over the last few years, there's a lot of new regulation coming in that is going to affect the industry and has been incredibly underregulated for a very long time. How much of a difference do you think that is going to make?
Hoping that it has a huge difference. Right, the role that regulation should play is setting the rules, establishing the baseline, and setting the table stakes for things like consistent disclosure around carbon footprint, for things like knowing what your supply chain is and having transparency to it, for things like understanding how the people who make your site are treated. That is the role that we believe regulation plays. I think to speak to the counterpoint, sometimes as well-intended as it can be, regulation can be more of a meat cleaver than a scalpel. It can be short-sighted or it can be too late. And I think, look at what's happening with PFAS. Thank God we're here now regulating the stuff to elimination, but we've known for 35 years that it was really bad and we needed to get out of it. So a good bad example, maybe finally we're here.
Well, what is the role of brands like Patagonia to advocate for these rules? Because Patagonia does a lot of advocacy work against oil pipelines. What's it doing in the fashion space?
So our role is not to necessarily set the highest, most unachievable bar that maybe we even can. Like, we love to aspire, we love saying we're going to go do hard things, we love making progress towards something that we care about. What we want to do is set a great example, of course, but have our voice used to set rules that help bring everybody inside. Like, I could sit here and call everybody out for all the different things that people say are naughty about fashion, and I will never do that. Like, my job is to call you in, because every time, and there's a bunch of people in this room who I know work various places, every time I meet one of you, You're passionate, you're talented, you're asking the same questions as we are, and you're trying to say these things out loud. So how do I get to you? I'm not here to talk about my work today. I'm here to have one hand up in the audience at the end of this that says, sweet, let's talk about it, I want to go do the work.
What about the money? Because what we've been talking about today is the need to get financing to the right places. What are the barriers from a brand perspective to invest, but also to get money into the places that you want it to go from outside areas to make the changes you want to see?
I'll start, maybe you can finish. I think sometimes the biggest barriers that we run into are not the normal things that are kicking around this week, next week, and the other. The barriers that we find are status quoism, excuses, and myths. Whether recycled material just isn't enough. Well, you add value to waste, you're going to get a decline. Or the quality's just not high enough. My 86% of the product line that's in the market this season is made of 100% recycled material, including our most technical styles that people are using to do those crazy pursuits I said earlier. So what's your next excuse? And I think for us, it's about confronting the status quo, always getting better, but that comes back to asking questions and having fortitude.
And what's your perspective? Because you're also in the space to a degree.
No, I think, in terms of legislation, I think we've had too little and it's too late. But please let's have it and have more of it. And I know I speak to a lot of CSOs and they're super tired of being accountants more than CSOs these days, but I'm sure we can find great tech solutions that can help us solve those issues. But I really think we need legislation to create that level playing field. And if I had a magic wand, I'd put a very high price on tax. Tax on carbon, right now. And I think in terms of finance, I think there's really a message to both investors and boardrooms about patience. We want not exiting, but actually giving CEOs the opportunity to make the long-term decisions, because we're not going to get there if they're constantly pressured under the old school GDP and turning over next quarter and have to show positive results. We're not going to get there if we don't get uncomfortable. And we do need to have that patient capital in the market to get to the solutions that are the ones that we're requiring.
We're nearly at time, so I'm going to end with a question about the consumer, because we've heard a lot about the role the consumer can play to drive change here. But when I speak to executives in the industry, I think there's increasingly a belief that the consumer is not going to pay for a product just because it's sustainable. But brands have a lot of power to make things that are more sustainable desirable. What do you see as the power of the industry to actually make this appealing?
First thing I'll say is I'm really tired of the consumer shaming that's going on. Like, marketing departments aren't here to generate demand. We've been training consumers to behave like this for a very long time, so I'm over that. Second thing I'll say is brands need to take responsibility. It is not good enough to assume it's somebody else's problem. It's not good enough to assume it's somebody else's pollution. It's not good enough to set commitments and then back off because you believe they're part. It's just not good enough. And the role of the brands is to ensure that the right things happen.
I 100% agree. It's totally on the industry to make the alternative, the sustainable solution that consumers will buy into and that is equally attractive and at a good price and at a good quality as well. So that's on us 100%. I don't think consumers are going to change this. Consumers are not going to stamp their feet in the stores and demanding sustainable product. They want to have beautiful products that makes them feel good. And that's up to us to make that.
I see a big red zero. Can I just say one more thing? 95% of customers who come to Patagonia don't come to us because of any of the work that my team does. I say that at home too, it's okay. 95% of customers come to Patagonia because we have a high quality product. The best thing you can do for the planet still today, right now, is build a product that's going to last as many fun, happy lives as possible. So let's go do that.
Great.
Thank you guys, and I need to introduce the final speaker, I believe, who is Dr. Mahmoud Muhyiddin. Apologies if I mispronounced that. And he's the UN Special Envoy on Financing the 2030 Agenda.
So, in case you're confused, I am not Dr. Mahmoud. You could sprint a little bit, but I would still not be him. I am Bokolo back on stage, and I am wearing a Cameroon missed that I was wearing something different earlier, Margot's Mode, and they decided to switch me out so that I could join the fashion show. But because Dr. Mahmoud Muhyiddin just joined us, I wanted to do a quick wrap-up session and just appreciate the points that have been made so far. And I think it's important that we point out what was just said just now, that change does not happen in comfort. And actually, ambitions should also be followed by finance. And we cannot just be ambitious, we can't talk about sustainability, we can't talk about how we want to see the world, and yet do not want to put the financing behind those ambitions. So whatever it is, the quality, the standards, the change that we want to see, we certainly should be following those ambitions with the finance. And I think all of the panels that spoke today, the common thread is we must act, and we must act swiftly, and we must be patient with the financing that we decide to unlock, and we must collaborate. And I think that these are the very important messages that we should continuously share throughout this week, but most importantly as we lead towards COP and ensure that the promise of this finance COP truly delivers on it, and truly delivers on it for communities and the EMD markets that are so desperate for this finance. And so it is my absolute pleasure to introduce His Excellency, the Special Envoy for Financing for Development, and the climate champion, the UN High-Level Climate Champion for COP27, Mahmoud Muhyiddin. You can come up to stage.
Right, thank you so much. And after all of these impressive introductory remarks of what I should be saying, already your expectations have been raised higher than what I'm going to deliver now. And already I've been in challenge of more than 60 sessions I've been invited to speak or participate in. The only one, and my daughter goes through my calendar, and this is the only session that she asked me why you are there. That tells you something about my fashion, or perhaps I'm very much on avant-garde, ahead of anyone. So anyway, it takes some sort of boldness to confront some reality, including just trying to answer a question, why I should be here. One could always be nice. I can always say, as I can see in the room, of what the light permits, that you all look great, fashionable, and I'm expecting from you a lot in that theory of change that my good sister, Her Excellency as well, she was one, I think you broke a record by being the youngest minister in the whole continent, and that record is still kept. All right, I don't know what you are doing to deny the youngest citizen of Africa to be a minister at younger age than yours, but you did great as a Minister of Trade, Investment, and beyond. So, three things on the theory of change that the fashion industry is expected to play. And I expect, and I got some updates from colleagues on the excellent remarks that happened before I joined. I meant to ask a couple of friends what's really happening, just to make sure that the concluding remarks of a bit of relevance to what I'm going to say. Three things. Behavioral change. Second is technology and R&D added together. And third, as Bugulu mentioned, it's finance. I think the fashion industry doesn't lack any of the potential influence and mobilization of resources for the three areas of work. The area that we are all struggling with, and Nigel is here, and Gonzalo's here as the champions of the champions in their own regions and their own ways of enhancing the knowledge from the south to the north. It's behavioral change. Finance gets mobilized when there are some good people with good ideas. And this is the new way that we teach economics and finance today. It's not about labor, it's not about land, it's not about entrepreneurs, as I was saying yesterday at a Bloomberg GFANS event.
it's basically about people, ideas, and other things. If you have people with adequate education, understanding their role in life, if you have people with good ideas, and if you have that with opportunities to reflect on what they think of change happens, because finance, the billions and the trillions will flow. We see the billions and the trillions flowing, but not necessarily in the right direction. We see assets under management are much more than what we require per annum, which is around $5.2 trillion, if you believe the good work by Lord Nixon and my good sister Vera Songwe, and many others, including the G20. So it's basically about ideas and behavioral change. What is missing, and here is a good friend who knows a lot about finance, insurance, and beyond, Avi Prasad is here. So it's good that I managed to say something before you joined. They always intimidate me when you come in that catwalk, but here we go. So it's basically kind of about the theory of behavioral change that goes into that theory of change that Bugulu mentioned. Esther Duflo, the Nobel Prize laureate, whom I quoted at least 3 times per day, and I'm not doing enough justice for her wisdom, that if you want to get something done, it's not just the change in production, it's the change in the consumption. And you are at the top of this. You can influence the behavior. You can get through the way of production and the way of display and determining what is really relevant and fashionable as leaders of the industry. And we are not really very much misled with what is happening by shifting the lines of production from Europe, from the United States, from some of the countries in the global north, to follow the same thing of the bad patterns of production, but shifting that to China, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Egypt, Nigeria, and some of the countries in Latin America. The change needs really to be there with the ultimate consumers who can afford selecting the type of clothing and type of garments, and they may just get something, wear it for less than its time for durability, because the fashion industry indeed gets us product that can really last longer, but they do not really last as much in the consumption. So this is the main thing. The other matter is technology and R&D, and I'm happy that in this report that I referred to a couple of times as well by Mario Draghi is telling us something about investments in innovation and R&D, including in areas related to garments, textiles, when it comes to Europe with relevance to the rest of the world. If you get those two together, the technology and the behavioral change, matters related to finance, which gets people like me busy 24/7, will be resolved. But we are stuck, not because of shortage of available funding, not of shortage of assets, not of shortage of opportunities to raise and mobilize funds, but because of the lack of leadership. And it's not just the lack of leadership that we witness, unfortunately, at the UN by not getting some solutions for some big questions for our existence and our lives, but basically the leadership missing in industry, leadership missing in community. I think if it is about resources, this industry is with the resources adequate to make the change. If it is about the will, I think it has leaders that they can make the change. If about impact and influence, you want every household, those who can afford wearing what you produce, or those who aspire to wear what you produce, or those who can just try to do as I tried, just to be at least casual smart. Thank you so much.
So thank you so much for everyone joining. Please, will all the speakers join me on stage so that we can take a collective picture of this moment. I think that we had a lot of good insight from our speakers, Dr. Mahmoud, Bokolo, Gonzalo, Nigel, Tim, Sagarika, Deborah. We had Sarah, Eva. And we're so grateful because it takes a team. Caro. Yes, Caro in front of the camera this time, not always behind. We've got Paula, our team from the plastics. And it really does take radical collaboration to achieve our goals. So thank you so much for joining us today. Woo! So please help yourself. The bar is open and there are snacks. Thank you so much for coming.